Okay, hello guys. Today I have another guest, a super guest actually I would say. He is one of the most influential voices here in Shanghai and also a personal coach for executives and business people here in China. Fionn, thank you for taking this interview.
Pleasure to be here. I'm happy to share my story, and it was great. I just heard a bit about your story and what you guys are working on, and it blew my mind a little bit. So always good to meet new people.
So going back to your story, the first question I want to ask, can you tell me more about when the idea of coming to China emerged and where you were at the time?
The very first time I came to China, I was only 12 years old.
Wow.
I came here with my father. Originally, he was planning to leave me at home. He was coming here to find some construction materials he was building a new embassy out in Africa. And he was like, "Oh, you stay with your friend for 2 weeks, I'll be back." I was like, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to China." I was like, "If you're going to China, I'm coming with you." So he was like, "Okay." So he brought me to China at that time. Luckily, they sort of found someone to help take me around. I was 12 years old, right? So I wasn't going to the construction sites and all that. So they found someone in the company who kind of just toured me around. I was in Nanjing and Shanghai at that time. And I saw this place and I felt like I was in the future, right? There's like these super tall skyscrapers and just like so many people everywhere. And I was like, this is a different city. This is like a sci-fi movie. So I always wanted to come back. I always wanted to check it out. And so then when I was in university, I specifically chose UBC in Vancouver, which is also called the University of a Billion Chinese, because it's literally packed full of Chinese students. And so I chose it there also because I wanted to learn how to speak Chinese. And I knew that I wasn't quite ready to go to China yet, but I wanted to study in North America. So I went over to Canada, studied at UBC, and then in my third year I came on exchange to China. And during that year I was in Shanghai, but I basically just traveled around China for the year. I didn't go to class and I didn't sort of learn Chinese the way that other students are learning, because I thought it was a waste of time, a whole lot of foreign students hanging around with other foreign students, like how good is your Chinese going to get? So I spent that time basically just traveling all around China to places where nobody spoke English and was able to pick up, spoken Chinese pretty well. Yeah.
Was there something that stopped you to come here? Maybe I don't know the language, I don't know the culture really well. Because I came here as a student and I had a certain idea of China, and then I came here, I discovered a different world. And for me to take this call, it's like, okay, it's like a challenge, a discovery I wanted to do. Was there something for you that stopped to come here, or some that didn't convince you right away the first time?
I think the specific example you're talking about, for me, not so much. And the reason being because I grew up in a number of different countries. Like, I'm not someone who grew up in one place. So because I'd always been traveling as a kid, coming to China was just another place, right? And it was just another language. And it was another language I was also interested in learning and picking up. So I started picking up Chinese when I was in university. So I started university when I was 16. And by the time I was 18, 19, I could already speak Chinese. Like, I could have a normal conversation. So that was never a problem for me coming back and forth. For me, it was just about where in the world do I want to be? And a lot of my life, the answer to that question has been China. And I haven't found many barriers to that. Sometimes, I'll get a job here, then, I'd come in and work for a while, then I'd sort of go out. Eventually I got to a stage where I set up my own businesses, and I was able to sort of have a stable life here and, get married and have kids, and my wife is from Shanghai. So this is one of my homes now. I don't see it as a foreign place, in a foreign culture and a foreign life. This is home, and it's maybe more home than anywhere else in the world right now.
So here in China now, you have your own business. What you do, you help people to realize their China dream, as you call. Can you tell us what is it and how you help them to do that? What is your China dream?
What is my China dream? Whoa,
and how you help other people to
big
realize
question.
it?
Big question. Oh man. So let's start with the big, and then we'll narrow it down.
Yeah, let's do it.
So my China dream is to help evolve our species, right, to a next stage of consciousness. I think we're on the tipping point right now. We have AI, we have technology, we have the internet, we have 5G that's about to hit planet Earth, and we are all connected. And yet there's parts of the planet that are still very lacking. There's a lot of people suffering in the world right now. Even China, right? We look at China and we see these big, amazing metropolis cities, you know, like the future. But there's parts of China that are still very much underdeveloped, right? Like it's still largely an undeveloped country.
That's true.
And so it's about saying we have a planet of 8 billion people, right? And rising. How do we create the kind of environment for everyone here to be able to live the kind of life that, you know, I've been privileged to live growing up in cities and growing up in developed countries, right? Like growing up in Europe or growing up in Africa in sort of a privileged community, right? So it's about saying, how do we create a planet where everyone has access to those resources, right? Where everyone has access to good education. But not just good education, and this is where I go a little bit extreme. I'm looking for how can we create an entire system where people are nurtured through their development, right? Like I think a lot of the education system at the moment, it stops you at a certain stage, right? You get to sort of a certain level and then that's it, right? You know, maybe you study and you get to become an expert at something, then you're an expert. And it's like, what now? Right? Maybe you go out and set up your own business.
It's the next level.
So, yeah, next level, exactly. And so what I'm looking at is how can we create a next level species? And that's my China dream, because I see right now on the planet, China is the engine. China is the vehicle that we can take to drive this species to a new era of prosperity, harmony, innovation, sustainability. There's never been a time in the history of humankind where we had so many tools and technology to make that a reality, but we have some barriers in place, right? We have the barriers of, you know, whether it's, you know, national borders and, you know, different cultures, and whether it's language barriers. And it's about saying, how do we transcend those? How do we get beyond those? And how do we actually create the kind of species where we're living in a sustainable planet? So that's my China dream. And so what I work with in individuals.
How you help entrepreneurs and executives to help them to reach that next level? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it kind of all ties into the same thing for me. Working with entrepreneurs and executives is just one of the things that I do. I have a number of different projects that I work on, a number of different businesses. And I actually work, like I homeschool my own kids, right? So my kids aged 3 and 5, we homeschool them, we travel around the world together. And I call it world schooling because we don't keep them at home. We go out into the world and we explore and we let them figure out what they like to do. And it's kind of the same idea all the way through. You know, I work with that age, 3 to 5. I also travel around the world and I run workshops for students in schools to figure out what they want to do with their life and how they can use school as a vehicle to get there, right? And it's kind of the same all the way up, right? So when I get to the executive level, it's about saying you work in a company, right? How can you use that company as a vehicle to create the kind of life that you want, right? And if you're an entrepreneur, same thing. How do you use the vehicle, which is your business, to create the kind of life that you want? So it's kind of the same the whole way through. It's how do you design your own reality and how do you make that a reality? And so what I do with people is we do a little bit of visioning and we figure out where do you want to go. And that has to do with tapping into their own personal purpose. What's really important to them? What are their values? What would they like this planet to look like? And what kind of an impact would they like to have? I know that's getting labeled idealistic, right? But I think idealism is important because it gives us direction and it tells us, if you could, what would you do? And then the question is, well, can you do it? And often the answer to that question, I think, is yes, it's possible. Maybe not within your lifetime, right? And maybe not in the next 5 years, right? But it's probably possible. So let's not limit ourselves by saying, is that realistic or not? Because was it realistic to, you know, have a rocket that could send out into space and come down? Is it realistic to go and live on Mars? Was it realistic to have a flying machine? Right, like these are all, it's context dependent. It depends on what era you live in. It depends on what technology exists. So it's about saying, let's dream a little bit, right? Let's dream big. Let's have these big dreams and let's see what we can make a reality. And so that's why I like to talk about the China dream, because it's not the China goal, it's not the China strategy, it's not the China 10-year plan, it's the China dream, right? So how can we dream of a better world? And how can we use the rise of China as a vehicle to take us there?
I know that, let's say you achieve the next level in going back to languages and you speak Chinese. And I'd like to ask two questions mainly. How did you learn Chinese and what tools you used? And the second one, Was it a skill that enabled you to navigate better in terms of business, your business here in China? Was it a skill that helped you here?
Yeah, two very different questions. So one, how did I actually learn Chinese? I didn't do it the traditional way, right?
Okay,
so
that's interesting. It's getting interesting.
I didn't use textbooks. I didn't go to class. I didn't even have a Chinese tutor. And so basically, and I'm not sure, how deep I can go into this on camera, but basically, when I was a student, and one of the reasons that I always wanted to come to Asia is because from a young age, I'd always thought that Chinese girls were beautiful.
Okay.
And so one of the reasons I came to, probably the main reason I came to China, was because I thought Chinese girls were absolutely gorgeous. And so for me, learning the language was less about, I got to learn Chinese, and it was about, I really want to talk to that girl. Right? I really want to understand how she thinks. And by having that passion, by having that interest, that curiosity, where it's like, I see you and we smile at each other and there's a good vibe going on here, but
Okay.
I don't know how to communicate, right?
That's a good way to learn the language.
And so
it's a good motivation.
basically what I did at that time as a student in China is I would just go out and make friends, and I would travel from city to city, and I wouldn't know anyone there, and I'd arrive in a place.
Immerse yourself.
Yeah, I immersed, a complete immersion. Went to cities, towns, little villages in China where not a single person spoke English, right? And not just that, but a lot of them didn't even speak Putonghua, right? Like it's these dialects, right? Like so I can speak Putonghua to them and they'll speak back to me in their dialect, and I have to try and figure out what they're saying. So I spent about close to, I want to say close to a year, but obviously there was summer break and all that in between. So maybe 8 or 9 months traveling around China. I went a lot down south, so down to like Guangxi province, Nanning, places like Yangshuo, Guilin, that area, then over to Yunnan, and spent some time Dali, Lijiang, Shangri-La.
How old you were at the time?
I was 18, 19 years old.
Pretty young.
Yeah, and so I spent those 8 or 9 months basically just immersing myself in the culture, right? And so I'd go to I'd meet a new friend in a new city, right? Who I'd, just walk there and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I gotta make some friends. And because I can't order anything on the menu because it's all in Chinese. So I just, start talking to someone in the basic Chinese that I knew. And slowly start to build up a relationship with them, and they'd invite me home, and I'd go traveling with their family, and they'd take me to the next village, and they'd take me picking oranges off the trees with them in their local sort of farm, and I'd stay with them for a little while, and they'd sort of take me around, and then when I felt like I was ready to head off, I'd head off to the next village, and it kind of went on like that. And at the beginning, what happened was I'd be sitting there at a table full of people, and you're probably familiar with this, there's all these Chinese people talking Chinese, and you have no idea what's going on, right? And my strategy for learning was I'll nod my head when they say something. If someone else laughs, I'll laugh as well. And then they'll kind of look like I know, but I'm sort of understanding something at least. And then whenever they say something that where they look like they're really passionate or they're saying something, I'll pick one of the words that they say and I'll say like 这是什么意思, right? Just ask them one of the vocabulary, right? And that way, one piece of vocabulary by one piece of vocabulary, I'm learning what they're talking about.
Yeah, this sentence I to be honest, quite often use it. 这个什么意思? 这个什么意思? With my teachers that I'm using to learn Chinese, it's a pretty useful sentence.
Yeah, completely. And so in that way, I went from understanding 0% of what they were talking about to 5% to 10%, and it kind of just, the more time I spent in that environment, and then there was kind of just like a click that happened. And I was like, I can go into these dinner conversations, I get it. I know what they're talking about. I can follow the conversation. And then when I asked this, it's actually because I'm learning a new technical word that I follow the rest of the conversation, but I don't actually know what that means. And it kind of transitioned for me in that way. But that was a real process where it was literally immersing myself in that environment for a few months, where I didn't know what was going on. I remember my dad called me on the phone one day. I'd been out in the middle of Yunnan for about 3 months. Called me on the phone one day. He's like, hey, how are things? And I was like, 我不知道怎么说英语，等一下, wait. I had to literally change gears in my brain to figure out how to speak English again because I'd forgotten. I just hadn't had any contact in English. I started dreaming in Chinese, So it was like this full immersion where I was changing the operating system of my brain.
Kind of.
Exactly. But what I found most important about that period was not actually the language. It was understanding the culture, understanding the way that Chinese people think, understanding the way that they communicate. Because I'd spent so long watching without understanding the words, I had a different understanding of the body language. Right? It's like in Chinese. Like if you're agreeing with someone, it's like or like what does mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? But it's like, yeah, I get you, I hear you, I see you, I understand what you're talking about. So, and it's like the head nod, okay. So picking up these tiny little sort of body language symbols gave me an understanding of how do Chinese people express themselves. And how can I learn to get into that? Okay, when I meet a new person, I kind of have to bow a little bit, so I keep my head low, and I sort of, okay, and then we become friends, and I can open it a bit more, Learning these small little nuances to communication, for me, was far more valuable than the actual language. But getting around to your second question of, how valuable it has been for me to actually speak the language.
Especially in business, to navigate the business area and to...
I would say with my coaching clients, not much, right? Because a lot of my coaching clients, if they're Chinese, they've mostly lived abroad already, right? So they speak good English. And if they're foreigners, I don't need to speak to them in Chinese. But what it has really helped me with is some of my other businesses, like children's education, for example. So one of my businesses is we teach life skills to kids, right? Age 5 to 11. And for me to communicate with the parents was important, right? For me to understand how to sort of, interact with those families and help them understand that we do education in a different way than other companies. That's something that I had to be able to explain. And one of the things that's really helped me is because I was able to speak Chinese and express these ideas about parenting and about education in Chinese, I was given a lot of opportunities to go on TV. And going on TV then made me like a semi-celebrity, where I'd be walking down the streets of Shanghai and people, oh, there's that Irish guy from TV, or there's that guy with the really cute kids from TV, the Hunshuaibao, like these mixed race kids, right? Oh yeah, his kids are so cute. And I'm like, okay, I've never seen these people before, but obviously they see me on TV, right? So that then helped give me like a brand, like a presence in the market where I'm like, okay, if I say something, it actually means a lot because there's a lot of people listening. So I got really deeper into sort of understanding, education, understanding children's development, understanding how we can be better parents and the psychology of it. And then I started sharing some of those ideas on TV in Chinese. And that really created like a real presence in the market for me, where it's like, wow, we know there's lots of foreign experts out there, but they all speak their own languages. And in China, there's people who know a lot, in their own field of expertise, but there's a lot of innovative new research that hasn't even been translated into Chinese yet. So the fact that I was able to sort of keep up with the new innovative research in this field, in addition to being able to express myself in Chinese, kind of created an influencer niche for myself here in China that nobody else could fill really. And so that's been incredibly useful for me, giving me those opportunities. And then more recently, we started doing our, I say recently, 2-3 years ago, we started doing like a live streaming. This when we were back in Ireland.
Yeah, it's something very huge right now in China. It's
we kind of caught a wave a little bit when we were back in Ireland, and we were just like talking about our life in Ireland and sharing, what it was like and what we were doing over there. And within a few months we had like tens of thousands of fans and like even tens of thousands of people watching us simultaneously at the same time. And it was kind of like, wow, this is interesting. So being able to express myself in Chinese to those people also was very important because their level of English is very low.
So I want to jump to the next question, probably the last one, or two more questions. So for people who are coming here to China young, or who are people who already have a career, trying to build their career here in China, expats mainly, is Chinese a must-have skill for them in order to advance their career, to navigate business opportunities? What, on your experience?
It didn't used to be. I would say, so I've been in and out of China for about a decade now. And when I first came, there were very few foreigners who spoke Chinese. So it was like, if you speak Chinese, it's a huge bonus. Then it became like, well, yeah, it's a good bonus and it's probably a good idea. But if you don't speak English, it's fine. I mean, if you don't speak Chinese, it's fine. And in the recent few years, it's become more like, well, you don't speak Chinese.
So what's
things are going to get a bit more difficult now, and I think it's going to continue in that direction, right? It's like, if you really think about it, China is becoming a global country, right? It's been trade-wise, it's been global for a long time, but now it's opening up its borders in many ways. Now there's still very few foreigners in the country, right? Like if you look at the percentage of the population compared to other places, in a lot of countries you'll have maybe somewhere between maybe 5 and 20% of foreigners. Sort of there's a lot of flow. In China, it's still a lot less than 1%. I think it's less than even 0.1% of the population here are foreigners. So it's still a tiny percentage of the population. So it's like if you imagine going to America and saying, I'm going to go to America and I'm going to have a career, but I don't speak English, right? Or I'm going to go to the UK and have a career, but I don't speak English. It's like, well, that's just silly, right? Like, don't do that. And so it's becoming more and more like that here in China now too, where it's like, if you want to be serious about building a career here, you got to learn Chinese. Now, if you just want to come here as an expat for a few years, maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and just sort of get a bit of experience or whatever, understand the Chinese market, not necessary. It would still be nice, right? Because you get respect of the people around you, at least for having tried. And it's going to give you benefits whenever you go back home, because there's still not that many foreigners who speak Chinese around the world. Quite a lot here now in China, though. And so it's about saying, what are your goals? If your goal is to actually build a career in China, like, of course, you got to learn Chinese. If your goal is just to come here for a few years, it's not necessary. I would advise still to do it. If your goal is to build a business around China or something to do with China, not learning Chinese is an insult, I personally believe. If you're trying to sell to Chinese people and you don't speak their language, what are you trying to do? Right? Like, spend some time understanding the culture, understanding the language, understanding the people, and then try to sell them something, right? Don't come here and try to sell people something when you're not even willing to spend the time to understand who they are and how they think. So that's how I would break it up in those few categories.
I mean, very interesting insight, actually. So the last question, get ready for this one. What would you do if you were competing with yourself?
What would I do if I was competing with myself? Ooh, I love it. In a way, I am every day. I've never believed in competition in a traditional sense, in that, like, oh, I'm competing with other coaches or I'm competing with other businesses in my industry. I don't personally believe in that. I've never believed in that, because at least the space that I work in, I'm always trying to work in the most innovative space that I can find. So for me, it's more about, if I coach someone, then they know more about coaching, then maybe they'll go find another coach later. Or if someone else coaches someone, then we're expanding the idea of coaching, right? Whereas like in China, coaching is still a very new idea, right? So please bring more coaches in, spread the idea, spread the market, and we can grow it together, right? We can actually teach an entire generation what coaching is about, right? So for me, I've never believed in competition in that way, but I'm always competing with myself, right? It's always about, how can I be better today than I was yesterday, right? How can I be one step closer to my dream today than I was yesterday, or tomorrow than I am today? And so in that way, I actually do, this is one of the things that I do a lot with my coaching clients, is sort of looking into the future and visualizing where you want to go, and looking into the past and seeing where you've come from. And then taking a third person perspective and looking at yourself in the present moment and seeing, where are you right now? Where have you come from? Where are you going? And how are you actually being in the world? And the way that I work and the way that I live is, I personally believe in what I call conscious evolution, right? So it's the idea that we are all evolving in every moment, every single, not just every second, every moment, right? We are evolving. We're becoming a new species. We're becoming new individuals. I'm not the same now as I was when I started this conversation, right? You guys are not the same. You've heard me talk about things that maybe you haven't heard before. You at least now have a new part of your brain that says something about the China dream or my story or something like that. And I've seen you guys nodding and smiling and begin to build a bit of a relationship. And now that's built a part of my brain where it says, oh, I have these 2 new friends, you know, that I can sort of reach out to if I want to learn more Chinese or if I want to learn how to build this app or something like that. So it's about saying we're all evolving in every moment, but how can we do it consciously? And the consciously part for me is the key, because it's about designing where you want to go. It's about consciously choosing who you want to be and then stepping into that self, right? So it's every moment of every day. How can I be not just my best self, but how can I be my whole self, right? How can I just be, right? And sometimes I get stuck in my thoughts or stuck in my emotions or stuck in my fears or memories or worries about the future. So I'm saying, how do I let all of that go? How do I be in the present moment and just be fully myself? So in that way, I feel like I am always competing with myself.
So speaking about present moments, where can people find you on the internet?
Best place, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm always posting stuff and
quite active.
With people. Quite active on LinkedIn. So if you send me a connection request on LinkedIn, most likely I will accept, unless the only time I really usually don't accept is if you don't have a picture or if you have like the logo of a company where a face should be, because I'm not that interested in connecting with companies, but I would love to connect with other human beings. So if you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's probably the easiest way. And then if you'd like to have a chat with me or talk to me deeper, I actually don't talk very much on LinkedIn because it's so active on there. I do a lot of my posting and I respond to comments and stuff, but if you actually want to have a chat, then reach out to me in a message and connect with me on WeChat, and then maybe we can talk.
The same way I did. I reached to him on LinkedIn and it was a blast to connect with you and have a chat. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome.
Amazing, man. Well, it was really inspiring. Like, to be honest. Thank you. It was really inspiring.